Good afternoon. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian.
And I'm Donya. Y'all, I'm rushed. Oh my God. How y'all doing today?
Yes, as always, thank you so much for spending the next hour with us, no matter how you tune in. And wow, we have such a show for you today. I'm
We
really
do.
excited. I know Donnie is really excited.
I am. I am. This is a good one, guys. This is a good one.
So, shall I get straight in and introduce our guest?
Yes, dive in, dive in.
Okay. So, Honora is a certified genealogist, and he's also a New Orleans native and proud Louisiana Creole with roots dating back more than 2 centuries along Bayou La Fourche. Forgive me, good people of Louisiana. I'm going to butcher some pronunciations. I apologize. And the German Acadian coast. He is a graduate of St. Augustine's High School and Tulane University. He works as a family historian at the Williams Research Center of the Historic New Orleans Collection. He also does historical and genealogical research professionally, including for TV programs like Finding Your Roots, We'll Meet Again, and he also works on the Georgetown Memory Project. He is a trustee of the Board for Certification of Genealogists and a board member of the Louisiana Historical Society and Genealogical Research Society of New Orleans. And with that, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Donya and Brian, for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Thank you so
Well,
much for coming.
um, as I said, really excited to have this conversation. Um, Even though I am a former Catholic, I keep up to date with Catholic news and all of those good things. Like everyone else, I was intrigued and excited to learn who the new Pope was going to be, and then we had Pope Leo. And I'm going to get started with our conversation there. What was it about his name that lit off a light in your head that you were like, I know that name and I need to research this person?
Well, that's a good question. And first of all, Brian, I have to tell you, my name is Jari Honore. So
Ah,
good
okay.
Louisiana name there, because it's been butchered a lot the last couple of weeks. But it's
I am
Honore.
sorry.
That's all right. Um, yeah, so I am from New Orleans. I am a practicing Catholic, 200 plus years of Catholicism in the family before me. And so I was quite interested in the conclave and in the election of a new pope. And almost immediately after sort of just getting over the initial surprise at the fact that an American was elected, I thought about his surname of Prevost or Prévost. And I said, it's a fairly common French surname. He's from Chicago. Undoubtedly, he's from French Canadians who, like so many other families, they crossed the border into Michigan or Illinois or upstate New York or what have you. That was my expectation. And ultimately, on his father's side, I saw the references to Italy and to France itself by way of his grandmother, Suzanne Fontaine Prevost. And so I said, okay, well, that's interesting. You know, it's more of a recent immigrant experience. And out of pure curiosity, I shifted my focus to his mother's family. And her name is, everywhere else in the US, they would say Martinez. In Louisiana, we tend to say Martinez, the French pronunciation. And, but I expected her to be, a Martinez of some, Latin origins, and was pleasantly surprised to discover relatively quickly that her parents, her older siblings, and many generations of her family were from New Orleans or from South Louisiana.
And as I said, that was quite a remarkable find, but not as remarkable as, because again, to look at him superficially, you wouldn't think that there was kind of anything kind of overly ethnic. I think that's the way I'm going to put it in his ancestry. But you found a bombshell. You actually found a link to Creole person, person of color, person of African descent, however we're going to describe it.
Absolutely, and you'd be surprised. I think we sort of have an ultra sensitive radar for those sorts of things down here in Louisiana. But a lot of people claim that they saw the opposite. They instantly saw a person who perhaps could have been of strong Italian descent, or I should say Sicilian descent, or Latin origins, or something like that. But a lot of people outright said, no, there's some sub-Saharan African in there somewhere, not too long ago. We being professional researchers, we kind of don't try not to make assumptions. But you're right. The Pope's mother was the youngest of seven girls in her family, and she was the only one born after they migrated up north to Chicago. Her six sisters before her were all born in New Orleans in the Seventh Ward community, and her grandparents were married in that neighborhood in 1887 at Our Lady of the Sacred Heart Church. And while her father, so this would be the Pope's maternal grandfather, was born at Port-au-Prince in Haiti in 1864, his wife was born in New Orleans, and both of his parents were from New Orleans. He was born during that time leading up to and during the Civil War, where a lot of Louisiana families considered or did migrate to Mexico, to Haiti. Quite a few went to France. They were trying to avoid the increasing prejudice that they faced in the American South.
So again, not discounting his European descended heritage, he really is also a child of the diaspora, because you just named two major places, Haiti and then New Orleans.
That's right, and I've already identified several ancestors of his who were enslaved, and at various points in time, either purchased their freedom or were manumitted from slavery. So yes, he is definitely a part of the African diaspora, definitely descended from enslaved people in this country, as well as free people of color.
And I have to wonder, I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing in terms of his writing or his words on this, but I wonder what perspective that gives him, just as a person. I mean, forget being a pope, I mean, kind of that mixture of African diaspora and European. I wonder what kind of viewpoint, how that shapes his worldview.
I don't know that this particular information has shaped his worldview. I can tell you that the Pope and his two brothers, they were not aware of this history. Prior to what 2 to 3 weeks ago, they grew up very much as typical 1950s suburban Chicago white identified kids. They've said more than once that there really were no discussions of history or ancestry or anything like that. In fact, in an interview that is on a videoed interview from a few years ago, the Holy Father said that all four of his grandparents were immigrants to this country. Now, we know now that that's not true, but that was his presumption at the time. I can tell you that they're part of this, prevalent situation that we find in most of our families where they passed. It's at some point around 1910, 1911, when they moved from New Orleans to Chicago, all of a sudden, records that had listed them as colored or black or mulatto, all of a sudden consistently become white once they make that trip to Chicago. And this is common. Chicago and Southern California, the Los Angeles area, these were big destinations for Louisianians who were migrating out of the state, those who remain identified as people of color, as well as the large number who were phenotypically able to move into the white world. And that's what his family decided to do.
Again, have that in my own family. My North Carolina born great grandmother, three of her siblings, they could all pass. She chose not to. Three of her siblings did. They moved north, slightly changed the surname, assumed a white identity. Then, 2 to 3 generations later, their descendants take a DNA test, and it's like, oh.
So have you spoken with him? Were you able to actually share his ancestry with him personally?
No. I mean, wow. It's almost unreal to think of the the things he's getting acclimated to in his new role. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any time for going into history or ancestry right now. But perhaps at some point in the future, he'll be able to sort of grapple with all of this. And I'm hoping that, and I think just even without these discoveries, I think that from what we know of him as an American who has spent 40 plus years of ministry outside of the U.S., immersing himself in Peru and other parts of South America, and then being superior of his international religious community, he's a citizen of the world. And so I don't, if I could phrase it that way, I don't think this could have happened to a better person or a person who would be more receptive and understanding. You all
Mm.
probably know that there are seven uh, Black Americans whose causes for canonization, causes for sainthood, are open right now, including one, Henriette DeLille, who was a free woman of color from New Orleans. And so I hope that the fact that the Pope now shares that lineage with Mother Henriette and with so many of us here in Louisiana, we might be able to see her cause advance more quickly.
I
Wow.
was really excited when this all kind of came to the fore. I was on the phone to Donegy immediately once this part of the story broke, because if I remember correctly, he would be the first sitting pope with proven African descended ancestry in over 1,000 years.
That's right. That's
Which
right. In the early church, we had several popes, Victor, Gelasius, and others who were of African descent. Just as we had saints who were of African descent. I always have to give a shout out to Saint Augustine. That's the school I went to, taught by the Josephites, and he was of a mixed Roman and Berber heritage from North Africa. So definitely, there's that history there. But yeah, he's the first pope to be a part of the African diasporic experience, to be the ultimately the perhaps great grandson or great grandson of enslaved people to sit on the throne of Saint Peter. And I think it's a point of pride, for all of us, especially those of us who are Catholics of color.
Now, before I come to my next question, Larry Davis, thank you for your question. Can you please make your question more specific? What you asked is really good, but it's a very broad question. If you can just make your question much more specific, I'll be more than happy to ask. Um, I wanted to quickly cycle back to the term Creole. Even I get confused. Is it an ethnic term? Is it a cultural term? For those of us who are really ignorant about that part of Louisiana kind of culture and history, can you help us better understand who is a Creole?
Sure. Well, yeah, Creole, in and of itself, Louisiana Creole, it has nothing to do with race. Okay, I was just out at lunch yesterday with two or three families, and these families happen to be white. Okay, but they were Creoles, and they described themselves as such. And I am obviously a black person of color. I'm Creole, and just identify as such. Creole refers to that unique culture that has been forged here in South Louisiana, along the Gulf Coast. These parts that areas that were formerly a part of New France, New Spain, for centuries now. That has hallmarks in Roman Catholicism and its practice, our Latin heritage languages, be it French or Spanish or Louisiana Creole. And also, a part of it is genealogy or ancestry, this rootedness in Louisiana. And that's ultimately, if you go back to the origin of the word Creole, it comes from the word creare, which means created or sort of a new thing,
Mm.
rooted in the New World, but of course from Old World origins. And for some families, that is a mixture of European, indigenous, African, what have you. And for some families, it does not include the African component, but culturally, we are all sort of inheritors of this cultural tradition. And I always tell people that when the term Creole really sort of takes on added significance is post the sale of Louisiana in 1803, when we're inundated, even though there had been people here before, but we're inundated with non-Creoles, with the Americans, or les Américains, as my great grandparents and their forebears would have said. And that would be y'all. That would be people who do not have this rootedness in Louisiana, and for
I
those who
can't
do have
say that
uh,
because I might have that. So you can't include me in the y'all.
well,
Okay.
but the thing is, it's not ancestry alone. It's the cultural practices.
I know. I'm just playing.
Yeah, I know, I'm messing with you, but no, it's. I was going to say that it, the that distinction between people identified as Creoles and people identified as Americans, that's not just a historical thing. There are people who captured in interviews as late as the 40s, 50s, 60s, who still see themselves in that light. And
Mm.
so I think it's a very conscious identity more than something tied to race. Um, People have this notion that it's also tied to hues or certain colors. They might look at Brian, for example, and say, "Oh yeah, that's a Creole man." No, not at all. But we know that mixed race individuals have been amongst us, forever, and so it's not tied to that at all.
Well, I guess in my head, it's almost, and again, a completely different history, but in terms of a formation of a culture and a people, it seems to me very analogous to the Gullah Geechee of the Low Country. So they're not ethnically one people, they're all African descended, but, from many different people, one kind of prevalent culture emerged.
That's right, and I think those are two of the most often cited examples that for those of us who are broadly, African Americans, our culture, our people, we're not monolithic. And so, the Gullah Geechee story is unique. It's different from the Louisiana Creole story. It's different from, the people who have been rooted for forever, down in the southern counties of Maryland or wherever you might be from. I'm thinking about our mutual friend, Angela Walton Raji, who always studies the freedmen of the civilized tribes. And she shared with me once that her ancestors would describe people who weren't from that background in the former Indian territories as nation people, because they came from over in the nation. They didn't come from the
Mhm.
territory, from the sovereign, Indian country. And so that's these sort of distinctions have always existed, but we get lumped together by, I think, the mainstream world as simply African American or uh, people of color in this country.
And Bernice Bennett actually, she asked a good question as well. Are you aware of the Pope actually reaching out to or having a conversation with any genealogist about this?
No, no, I'm not aware of that, and I honestly just don't think that he has had the time to do that um, thus far.
Um, I
Well,
didn't know that he
Larry,
had.
he did come back. Larry did come back and he tried to clarify a little. He said it's just absolutely shocking to me that the Pope is a part of America's heritage black population. He said, what I am attempting to say, he's an African American descendant. And that's what it is. He is that. I mean, is is that something that you see him coming back later on once he gets himself as acclimated as he can be into his job, coming back and then trying to figure that out, trying to get more in depth into it because his family did not, because they did pass. I mean, that's a whole thing in America
Sure,
pass.
I think so. I think there's a precedent for it. In New Orleans, especially, we still speak glowingly of what is it? I guess 38 years ago now, 1987, when St. John Paul II came to New Orleans, and it dominated the news, dominated everything in the city during that period. And he made a special address to African American Catholics, and people still refer to that fondly, and his recognition of the gifts of Black people to the church. And I think that Pope Leo, not if but when he makes his American papal visits, will definitely include New Orleans on his itinerary. And I think that there will be some overtures. There will be some uh, meetings, discussions with the Black Catholic community. And perhaps his ancestry will play a part in that. Throughout all of this, I've been thinking about that line from the scriptures: "The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." And of course,
Hmm.
for those who are Catholics, it's even more relevant because we do believe that Peter is the rock. I mean, Peter means
Yep.
rock. It goes back to rock, and literally, the church, the Vatican, is built upon the resting place of Saint Peter. So the fact that now the successor of Peter is a person who, not that long ago, in American history, most seminaries, most convents, even were closed to openly identified people of color. That's just a reality. We have a few pioneering examples of blacks who were able to become priests or religious sisters or brothers, but up until, I would say the 1920s and forwards, and really in large numbers the 1940s and onwards, it was difficult for them to pursue vocations. And so to think that a person whose gift of a vocation could have been denied potentially not that long ago is now the Pope. It just shows how things come full circle.
Full circle. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to quickly address something that Larry Davis said, because he said, and it was a good comment. Please forgive me. He, now, Pope Leo, is now one of the most influential African American descendants in the world. I'm going to
He
drop a
is.
little bombshell on a lot of Americans. I don't care how you describe yourself. Most people outside of this country, and specifically in Europe, they kind of assume that if you're an American and you have any kind of ancestry in this country for any length of time, they almost assume that you're going to have non-white blood. That's
Mm.
been this is someone who's lived outside of this country for most of my life, lived in England for a long, long time. Um, and that's just something that they say. We just assume that most Americans, even the whitest presenting Americans, may have some African blood. They're like, y'all are
Yeah,
melting
but
pot.
in what Larry is saying, because he said a lot of different things, and I
Mhm.
can see his shock in what in the things that he's saying. Because he also said, in my view, his election is more significant than President Obama.
Mm,
Technically, it's as
it is.
significant. I'm not going to say it's more, but
I'm
I
only
will
going.
agree and say that it is as significant. But my biggest thing is, where is he going to go with this? I went to Catholic school, so I'm kind of very familiar with the stuff that you're saying, Jari. And because of me in the Catholic school, going to I didn't even want to be a Baptist at one point in my life because I felt like it was too wild and rambunctious. I'm not even going to lie to you. I
And
used to
too
tell my
long.
mother, no, it wasn't the length. It was just it scared me.
Hmm.
As a kid, it scared me. So, and my mom knew that. And she let me go to church at my school. And she let me, experience Catholic faith. And so I kind of I remember certain things. I do remember things from it, but just listening to you just now and talking about the stuff that there were more than, there were other African Americans in sainthood and things of that nature, that shut me back because I'm like, okay, well, he's the first black pope. And yes, he's the first black pope per se. But if there are other people that are out there or proven black pope, if there are other people that are out there that have this sainthood and things of that nature, they were actually more acknowledging black people more than we know.
Oh, those early black popes, they were out front and center. There was no ambiguity about that one. I'm also going to throw in a little bone about the Borgias. We really don't, there's some question marks about the Borgias and some of their ethnic makeup. But I just really wanted to quickly say I think I'm feeling Larry's kind of energy on what
Hmm.
he was saying about being so influential. And I'm not saying that President Obama wasn't, because he was, but the Pope, he's got a world stage in a way that no American president has. His reach is global, and his job is for the rest of his natural life, as opposed to
And
4 to 8 years.
and I think that in a way, whereas some people were um, um, they were hesitant to embrace President Obama because we do live in a highly partisan world, highly partisan country in particular. Some people were never going to give the man any credence because he happens to be a Democrat and they happen to be Republicans, or vice versa. But the Pope is seen, I think, by most parties as a moral leader, as someone who is not immediately tied to any kind of partisan politics. And so to have a person in that role who is of African descent, and of recent sub-Saharan African descent, I think is very special. And I think that the pendulum on all of this was sort of swinging anyhow, so that most people, I think, in England, which Brian can speak to, in the larger European world, and in North America, people are becoming very tired of politics. They're becoming very jaded and very unimpressed with the output of a lot of political systems. And so they may be shifting back to more of spiritual or religious leaders as that compass, as that sort of where they're looking for from words of truth, words of sincerity, and everything. And the fact that at this moment, we have a person who is more like us than not like us is significant.
I think my biggest issue is now that they know, has a change come about how they react to him. And because, I mean, let's be clear and let's be honest. Once you know that somebody's black, things seem to switch. If
Mm.
they don't be as open, and I'm that person. I'm gonna say that. So they don't. Are they going to follow the same way? Is something going to change with it now that they know, even if he hasn't made any verbal, you know outright saying, yes, I am a black man, boom, okay, he hasn't said that, but
I don't. Let me say this. I don't look for that. And I don't even think I'd want that. I mean, a person who, and I deal with this a lot, okay? This week, I had a very nice 50 something year old woman with her 17-year-old daughter who came in, and within less than a half hour, I had told them that their surname is not really their surname, and that they're
Mhm.
part white, part black, and part Jewish, part Ashkenazi Jew, all rolled into one. And they had no clue. So I just say that to say, and I even told this to my bosses. I said, "Y'all are impressed by the whole Pope research." I said, "But we do this almost weekly, daily.
every day, yeah.
I don't look for anything demonstrative from these people. This lady or Pope Leo or anybody, they have lived 30, 40, 50, 60 years of life as
Who they
white
were,
for whatever that
yeah.
means in this day and age. And I guess I don't know what they could do from a demonstrative, performative stance that would, sort of give them their bona fides in the black community. Um, you know, they're going to continue to have the same, let's just say skewed access to opportunities and privileges that we don't benefit from because we are quite visibly African American. So if they present
Yeah, but he
themselves
didn't
for,
have that at first. But that's the thing. Is he going to have that now? Is the question. Is it going to be skewed? Is it going to be, messed up? Don't get me wrong. I know who he is. He was
yeah,
raised a
yeah.
white man, and
Hmm.
that's what it is, and that's fine. Um, I mean, I have all of
So,
the everything, but in the same instance, once you become black, and I think it comes back to that 1%. Once you become black, what changes in you? All of a sudden now people have a certain thought process about who you are because now you're considered black, even if all your life, and I'm just wondering how that's
I
going to
don't,
affect.
I don't, again, and we can,
We
I
don't.
don't see it that way. No, no, no. I don't see it that way because I know so many people who have gone through this experience, and you know what it
Okay.
becomes, and I guess it just shows maybe how far we've come, or maybe not how far we haven't come in this country. It almost becomes sort of just a coffee table conversation. Oh yes, Sam and Pete. I discovered 5 years ago from a professional genealogist that I have a black grandmother. Isn't that interesting? And it's sort of left there. So I don't see it as transformational. I don't. My white friend, quote unquote, white friends who we know now have some black in them. It hasn't really changed
Yeah.
their lives. They're good people, most of but it hasn't been transformational. I don't think. I think if anything, they may be more sensitive to black issues of people of color, but in terms of their livelihoods and everything, mm-mm, mm-mm. Like I said,
And
it's just a
again,
factoid almost, I guess that's okay. I
Okay.
mean, Lord knows there was a time when it wasn't a factoid, where that one drop would ruin people's lives. The discovery of that one drop, you know.
absolutely. You just beat me to it. Donnie, that too is a great question. I think what's always going to complicate things with Pope Leo is his earlier anti kind of administrative tweets got shared on X, Twitter, whatever we want to call it, and he is even to this day being critical of the Trump administration. So that's always going to color how some people in this country are going to see him. If anything, they will probably use the one drop rule to find another reason not to like him.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I think it was Bernice. I'm not sure who. As far as I'm aware, he is not claiming. He's not even claiming to be a person of color. As far as I'm aware, he identifies as white. That's kind of the end of it. Um, and again, this is kind of difficult. I mean, we can theorize all we like to. I'm kind of curious now that he knows this. Now that he must have been made aware of it. It's going to be a very interesting personal journey for him. I mean,
Yes.
this is as
Yes, it is.
personal a journey as you can get.
Yes, it is. So we
And
do
like I
have a
said,
couple of questions.
I'll just mention again, I don't think this could have happened, if you will, to a better person. I think that this was a person who was already not wedded to notions of whiteness or blackness or anything like that. I mean, to spend 40 plus years away from home, that changes a person. The
Yeah.
It
mission,
does.
anybody that has truly been Catholic, Protestant, Methodist, it doesn't matter. Anybody who's truly been a missionary and who has that missionary zeal, they they can enculturate themselves anywhere. That's what they've practiced for decades. So
And I'm going to use me as an example. I joke about it with my family and with Donya all the time. I've relatively been back in this country for a short period of time, and I'm navigating the United States as like I'm an immigrant. Forget the fact that I was born on a naval base, born right here, lived here in my early childhood. I feel as much an immigrant as anyone else does. So
Well,
no
we
doubt,
have a. Go ahead.
so I said no doubt, he coming from his kind of world citizen view is the same way.
So we have another question from Lucretia Sims. She said, "Would you call the people that was enslaved in Louisiana Creole or brought in to be enslaved? What would you call?"
um, that question is maybe phrased a little bit unusually, but certainly I would argue that numerically the vast majority of Louisiana Creoles in the antebellum period and at the point of emancipation were enslaved. Were enslaved Creoles. And if one wants examples of that, all they have to do is look at estate inventories or at advertisements for enslaved people, and you'll see Marie, mulattoes Creole, or Pierre, a likely Negro, a Creole of Louisiana. Those are commonplace. I mean, those descriptors were used for my own family, who was enslaved.
Yeah, I would imagine that, say, an enslaved person called, I don't know, William Smith, or an enslaved woman called Sarah Brokenbraw, they would not have been considered Creole. specifically if they were being brought in from North Carolina, Virginia, all of
That's
those
right.
cultures
As a
coming
part
from
of
the
the
upstate.
Second Middle
Yeah,
Passage. That's
right.
correct. Those people are described, as an American Negro or American mulattoes or what have you. But of course, in some instances, a lot of instances, they married into the local Creole population, and so their children almost always took on the cultural practices, the religion, and also the language of the Creole parent. And so you can't go by name alone, um, but it's ultimately tied, I think, to ancestry and to culture.
So, is there any truth to what Avashay said, that Haitians are upset that Americans are claiming him, and why would they be if he was an American anyway from the beginning? Like,
Yeah,
why?
I think there was a lot of back and forth because of the fact that his grandfather, his mother's dad, was born in 1864 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and I think that there was that excitement, there was that enthusiasm on the part of Haitians to claim his maternal grandfather and his maternal grandfather's family. And ultimately, now we know that, yeah, that grandfather, Joseph Nerval Martinez, who was born in Port au Prince, even though both of his parents were born in New Orleans, and I think all four of his grandparents were born in New Orleans. If you go back before that on one line, they do have roots in Montreuil. Montreuil is a little section near Saint Marc in Haiti. So there are Haitian roots there, but those Haitian roots were earlier. As a result of the revolution, they go to New Orleans for a few generations, and then right around the time of the Civil War, they make that sort of exploratory venture back to Haiti because of the intense political climate in this country. But they come back within less than 2 years. So his grandfather was reared, entirely in New Orleans. But there's enough for everybody. The Pope has ancestors who are among the earliest families of Montreal. He is kin to the Lamelles. He's a blood Lamelle descendant, and that's Lemelle, which is a huge name in Southwest Louisiana. Suzanne Malvo, who's done a little piece about her connections to the Pope. Suzanne is a Lamelle descendant 3 or 4 times over. So, um, he also has a great grandfather who was born on Guadeloupe, named Aristide Baquier, who was of French descent. So, quote unquote white, a Frenchman, but born in the colony of Guadeloupe. So there's also a line that goes back to Havana, Cuba, the Ramos line. His great great grandmother was Rosa Ramos, born here, but her grandfather was born in Havana. So there's enough for everybody. And then, of course, we didn't even talk about the fact that we're thinking about that shift in identity, that conscious shift on the mom side from black or colored to white. But on the dad side, talk about making assumptions. They're not even really Prevosts. They're Rigatanos. The team at Ancestry.com and some other genealogists, they really pursued that line and fleshed it out. So where it wasn't until around 1917, because of a love triangle, yes, a love triangle involving the Pope's grandparents, that they recreated themselves, or the grandfather recreated himself from Salvatore Giovanni Rigatano to John R. Prevost.
Oh.
So
Um,
Ah,
I'm really glad that you spent some time fleshing that out and saying what you
yeah.
said, because I was going to jump in and say, if you're an American, if you were from the United States, let's just start there. There is no one place that can entirely claim us. So I'm
That
really
part.
happy that you said that there are multiple places that can claim him as their son,
Yeah.
all over the
I think
Caribbean.
we all were thinking that. I think
Yeah.
because I'm sitting here just taking my own personal thought process. I mean, you seen my DNA, Brian. I go literally from Europe, America, Africa, Australia. I am everywhere. So Jamaica. I mean, I'm everywhere. So no, I think we were all definitely thinking on that that same line as well. So in your research, because it's the question is coming up, you know, did they know at all? Like, when did the information stop getting passed down? When did the shift? Now I know you said it probably happened in Chicago. That's when they went from being black, mulatto to white. Do you think that the family continued to pass it though, or they just stopped?
No, no. Only because, long before he was in the spotlight, uh, per se, the Holy Father was asked once, just casually in an interview, what is your history? What is your background? And he said, "Oh, I'm an American. I'm from Chicago. All four of my grandparents were immigrants."
Oh
And
wow.
so I don't think there was any notion that there were deep roots in this country. Forget about the racial qualifier, but in this country at all. They just weren't aware of that. And that lack of roots, that lack of oral tradition is common to those who come from families that passed and now now they've made the discovery, or it's been made for them. I wrote a paper when I was in at Tulane, and it won the Boyette Prize for writing, and it was called "Scapegoating the Past." And the sort of the hook, the opener, was a cousin of mine who was in her 60s when I was a college student, and I just responded very excitedly to one of her online posts. She gave the surnames. She said they're from Louisiana. Anybody with info, reach out. I reached out saying, "Oh, of course I know these names, and I know this one, I know that one, I know Uncle Susu and Aunt Zaza, and this one and that one." And her question to me was simply, "What are we?" This is all by online exchange. "What are we?" And instantly, and I think also there was some indication that she was a Californian. And so I knew what was going on immediately. And I said, "Well, I don't know about you and your immediate line, but I'm black and my family's black. Now we got roots, like you said, Donya, everywhere, but we identify as black." Ultimately,
Right.
her mom had been born down here, was aware of their history, but at the time she was in her mid 80s, and the way I describe it is she would play a Fred Sanford every time her daughter tried to bring this up. And at this point, this lady is widowed. She's raised all of her children, grandchildren. She owns her home, but she was in fear for her life that this information would come out. And she told her daughter, "You're just too smart. Who told you to go and look for all of that?" And she's like, "Mama, I have the records. I see colored. I see mulatto." And the mother shut her down, did not want to go there at all. So, yeah. And she said before that, we had no clue. They didn't even know that they had Louisiana roots, much more black roots from Louisiana,
And
because in
it
these
makes you wonder.
families.
It definitely makes you wonder because of the fear that went on for black folks. Is that, was that in most instances that's why people began to pass, because they didn't want to go through those types of things. I can remember watching something on the Today Show, and a lady found out that her mom was actually half black,
Hmm.
and the lengths that her mother went through during the summertime, like she would walk around with the long gloves and an umbrella because she married
Hmm.
a white man. And she
Hmm.
would, literally, she during the summertime she would cover up because she did not want that skin to tan. And then even in our comments, I think it was Renette that came out and said she saw young pictures of Pope of Pope Leo, and that she was like, he was obvious. They obviously were people of color. It's obvious to us
To
in most
us.
instances.
to
Yeah,
us.
it's obvious to us, but everybody else, it's just not. I don't know
It's
why.
As
absolutely.
I'm going to tell you, in Connecticut, my elementary school people, they all swore that my mother was Sicilian, Southern Italian, maybe Turkish or Greek, anything other than black. I had to tell them my mother is black.
Mm,
Yeah.
So,
mm,
and
I
again,
just
that's a
using
good question.
some well-known examples. The family who owned Baldwin pianos for over a century, the Wilson family, people who ultimately were of a mixed background from New Orleans. Some of the founders of Johns Hopkins University. One of the early presidents, considered the second founder of Georgetown University, for Healy. And there's a book about their family called Passing for White. All these people, were gifted, had a whole lot of genius to offer, but they wouldn't have been able to do so had they remained identified as people of color. In recent years, one of our very popular mayors of New Orleans, Mitch Landrieu, whose father also was mayor, Moon Landrieu, the last non-white mayor before Dutch Morial was. I'm sorry, the last white mayor before Dutch Morial was elected. He has now said in video interviews that yes, they're aware that they come from a legacy that goes back to slavery and free people of color, and that they've been aware of it at least since the 1980s, if not before. So it's beginning to come out by way of the DNA tests, and I think younger people, the newer generations have a curiosity, and fortunately, the web has made it easy for them to start making those discoveries.
And I'm going to say that it was probably fortuitous for you and everyone else that was researching the new pope. You didn't have to go back very far to find the kind of forgotten, intriguing, untold stories part of his ancestry. It's not like you had to go into the 1700s or antebellum period. You're talking about records that are easily accessible for people, census records, marriage records, death records.
Yes, absolutely. Like you, Brian, with the members of your family, in many cases, there's some obfuscation that takes place there. They change the surname, they modify the spelling, they maybe even come up with an entirely false surname, that has no real relevance to their history. But in this case, no, there was no change in spelling or surname or anything like that. It was just that simple change in geography, because the Pope's aunts, his the six girls who came before his mom, the majority of them, if there is a race indicated on their birth certificates, it's colored. The 1900 census, you will see his grandparents and I think the oldest girl or oldest few girls listed as black. Um, and the grandfather was a cigar maker, which is a profession he followed even in Chicago. So these people were very much a part of this community until they weren't anymore.
hmm
Uh,
So now
and
you have me intrigued. The cigar making, did that have anything to do with the ancestor that was attached to Cuba? I'm just curious.
Perhaps cigar making was a very common profession amongst Creole families, and really amongst
Okay.
a number of different families, because in the era before, the commercially produced cigarettes, hand rolled cigars were very popular. So cigar making was a incredibly popular pursuit, and you have some families who even had factories, had commercial enterprises where they would have multiple individuals working for them, cutting tobacco leaves, rolling tobacco leaves. Um, and I think about the Faustina family out of Mobile or the Marine family out of New Orleans. Both of these families had their own cigar factories.
We learned something new today.
Hmm.
Uh, oh, you're muted,
You muted,
Donya.
Don.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I didn't want y'all to hear Bruno barking. No, but we always learn something new. That's why I love our show. That's all I said. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I just want to. We the show is almost over. Goodness gracious.
I know it has absolutely flown by. I mean, I do hope that, and I did, the Pope is a busy man. He's got a lot on his plate, comes with the job. Um, but I would love to hear news that he, would reach out to either you or one of the other researchers that provided these missing gaps in his family history that he may not even be aware of. So
And I
I do.
want
I
him to
hope
reach
he,
out to him.
yeah.
That's my biggest fear. I'm not even going to lie to you. My biggest fear is that you won't be reached out to because you're the main one. You're the main one that found this stuff. And my biggest fear is that somebody else is going to get what you did. They're going to ride and piggyback off of that. And that's one of the main reasons why we had you on the show, so people knew who you were. Because let's be straightforward and honest. Black people don't get the recognition that they're supposed to
That's true.
get.
That's so true.
And I am extremely proud of you and what you have
Thank you so
done.
much.
And if you don't get reached out to, the story is here. And we all know who it is
That was one of the
that
reasons
actually
why
did it.
we really wanted to have you on the
That's
show.
right.
Well,
Yes, most definitely.
thank you all so much. As I said, I'm just excited for the people of my hometown and of my home region. And if y'all think we cut up on a normal basis with second lines and parties and everything else, when that papal visit occurs, this city is just going to be swamped with people and with good feelings. And I also want to point out that we need, and you two are great exemplars of that. Brian, with the work you're doing at the museum, Donya, all of your research. I don't know how you keep up with it. We need more Blacks to pursue serious methodology in genealogy and consider it as a career, consider lecturing, consider pursuing certification. Right now, there are still only about 5 Black certified genealogists in this country and ultimately around the world.
And we
And
want to have you back on the show to talk
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Because, me and Brian have an issue with the certified genealogist becoming certified, a little issue. So we would love to have you back on the show as a certified genealogist
And even
to
better,
talk.
you are also an assessor. Is that correct? So people who are
A
going for
trust
their
a trustee. I'm one of the
trusting.
trustees on the board. Um, Only the second Black to serve on the board after LaBrenda Garrett Nelson. And so, yeah, have gone through the certification process, have in bits and pieces, mentored others who are going through certification. And it's not. I think that we could alleviate a lot of people's concerns about the process. For another show. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, we will definitely figure out the best time to have that. And we already have somebody up here talking about saying, yes, I was thinking about getting it. So you already know this is a show that's in the making, y'all. And we're going to talk about it. But I want to thank you because we are running out of time. Um, uh, but I do want to thank you for being on the show and just talking about your experience and doing this research and just learning what you've learned. I know that it had to be a little jaw dropping, not that much because
Mhm.
you are African American researcher, so not too much shocks you when you find stuff. Um,
It's
but
not,
overall, yeah, I'm thank you for being on the show.
I'm just going to say not much in terms of research shocks me, but if I found out that a sitting pope actually had connections to the African diaspora, whether that's in the Caribbean, whether that's in the United States, I would be like, what? We got a Black pope? Man,
That's
Yeah.
it.
you have to scrape me off the ceiling.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's it. So next week, guys, we're going to go back to our relative race series, and we're going to have Team Green on the show. Um, we've had Team Red, we've had Team Blue. Now we're going to Team Green with Jennifer and her daughter. We're going to learn their background, how they felt, what was going through their heads. Also, I want to know more about their particular, if they learned anything. One of my biggest things that I want to know about them is if they learned anything about their hereditary thing that they had going on as far as their hair loss, and if they were able to find out more about that. So make sure you guys, tune in because we definitely will have Team Green on the show next week.
Yes, we will. So, as always, thank you for spending this last almost hour with us. No matter how you've tuned in, as Donya said, we will be back here at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in all the usual places. So, without further ado, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a blessed day, and we will see you next week.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you
much.
guys. Stay on, Jari.